Alright, so in a community post and on Reddit, I asked you clowns to give me your unpopular South Park opinions, and you delivered. So let's start off with this one, just because I actually don't think this is an unpopular opinion at all. I've seen lots of people complaining about Integrity Farms. The most common complaint I hear is that because of the Integrity Farm stuff, South Park now revolves around lots of marijuana-based humor. I mean, yeah, some of the observational jokes can seem a little too on the nose with, you know, the munchies jokes and all that. I don't know, I don't personally see any particular problem with that, but it's down to personal preference, and I'm not gonna criticize people who think that way. I mean, the Integrity Farm stuff really hinges on how much enjoyment you can get out of seeing Randy be an ignorant jerk-ass, and that's pretty much about it. You know, a lot of people say that Randy Marsh is an overrated character, and I can see where they're coming from. You can definitely tell in the mid to late episodes that Randy Marsh started becoming sort of Matt and Trey's creator's pet character. I can begin to feel Randy Marsh as a character growing stale by season 18. He went from being the least interesting parent character on the show in season 1, with like pretty much no lines, aside from, you know, saving South Park that one time and telling Stan to keep the thermostat under 70, to only mildly funny in season 2. He was pretty much just as relevant as Stuart McCormick at this point in the show. He's definitely present all throughout the show, and by like season 3 they have him figured out as a character, and he's just as funny as you'd expect him to be. But it's really not until like season 9 until he becomes like the show's go-to parent character. In a way, I sort of view The Losing Edge as the episode that opened the floodgates for Randy Marsh. Up until this point, Randy Marsh and all the other parent characters were lumped together in terms of intelligence. This episode introduced the famous version of Randy Marsh that every South Park fan knows and loves. And we got to see that version of Randy Marsh in just about every episode for 12 years. I would imagine that at some point Matt and Trey tire of constantly having to tell stories about Randy going from obsession to obsession. To me, Integrity Farms just offers a nice change of pace where now we can see Randy settle into one particular obsession and watch him work with it. I mean, to an extent, I kind of understand all the buzz around Randy these days. Yeah, they kind of are taking his toxicity as far as they can go with it. And he also does seem to be stealing the spotlight away from the other characters a lot these days. But I would make the argument that the Integrity Farm stuff is actually integral for Randy Marsh's character to keep going on and being interesting. Like I said before, by like season 18, his character begins to feel stale and a little tired. The Randy being Lord stuff is interesting on paper, but they really don't go anywhere particularly interesting with it. The same goes for Randy being PC, and the same goes for Randy and the Member Berries. And that's not to say by this point he's ruined as a character. He was great all throughout Holiday Special and A Boy and a Priest. But it's clear by this point they don't really know what to do with him. He still seems to be Matt and Trey's favorite, but they seem to be running out of material for him. Then somehow, someway, they came up with Integrity Farms and they had a reason to keep using their favorite character. So do I agree that Randy Marsh is an overrated character that Matt and Trey show way too much favoritism towards for no reason? Yes. Do I think they should stop using Randy Marsh and give Integrity Farms a rest? Definitely not. In a way, I admire them for doubling and even tripling down on this arc that's so divisive amongst the fanbase. I admire it for the exact reason that this person thinks the Canadians are the best part of South Park. I mean, think about it. Terrence and Phillip and the Canadians have been an infamous part of the show since the very beginning. I mean, Terrence and Phillip were created as a big fuck you to anyone who likened South Park to nothing more than toilet humor. Unless we forget the reception that Not Without My Anus got from angry fans in the 90s. And then using the Canadians to make fun of the writer's strike of 2008, it's just perfect. And if there's anyone out there who doesn't like the Canadians, I have 2 words for you. Mr. Stick Your Dick in My Balls. So most of these opinions are completely valid and all that, but this one is not. So for those who don't know, the credits theme is actually the instrumental of the original South Park theme song. Comedy Central said that Matt and Trey had to come up with a shorter theme song though, so they pretty much just took the instrumental, sped it up, and then they hunted down Les Claypool and made him re-sing his lines. And so we got the definitive version of the South Park theme song with Les Claypool and the boys' lines redone so that they sound like actual people and not horrifying cultist monsters. Why the fuck does Claypool sound like the kind of person who'd be required by law to inform his new neighbors of his move-in here? I'm sorry, but this is without a doubt the worst version of the theme song. And I know this person says their least favorite is the theme that they use from seasons 6 to 10, which is the bluegrass theme, but no, there's no way that that's worse than the pilot version. Here's a pretty common one I've seen a few times here and there. There are lots of Pip fanatics in the South Park fandom. For those of you who don't know, Pip was pretty much the show's prototype version of Butters. He was a little long-haired British kid who all the kids used to pick on in like the first 2 seasons. There was also a running joke where they would call him French, I guess because they're getting their types of Europeans mixed up. In season 4, he even got his own episode, and here's another unpopular opinion both from me and from this person, that it was actually a pretty good episode. But the fans hated it and had to cry about it because it didn't have Stan, Kyle, Cartman, or Kenny in it. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend it's like a great episode or anything. It's certainly not as bad as any critic on YouTube would have you believe. I've seen this episode listed on so many top worst South Park episodes lists, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. Another goofy, wacky fun fact about Pip is that he's passed on.
These wounds won't seem to heal. This pain is just too real.
And these people right here would like to pay their respects. Was it necessary for them to kill off Pip? Probably not, but I can kind of see why they did. Pip was already kind of a bygone era by this point. I always viewed the season 3 episode 2 men naked in a hot tub as a sort of unofficial torch passing of the social outcast archetype that Pip used to fill and handed over to Butters in this episode. You notice that after this episode, when the show needs a character for all the kids to gang up on and pick on, they go for Butters instead. So it probably already didn't help that there's a new pushover loser character. And then South Park fans' reception to the episode Pip, I think, is what did it. And then the last time he spoke in the series up until his death was in the episode Professor Chaos, when he totally blew it in being the boys' new 4th friend. A similar thing happened with Miss Crabtree, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny's bus driver. The difference, however, is in how the show handles these 2 deaths. Pip is a character who is already being phased out of the show by the time they finally decided to kill him. And you have to admit, the way he goes out is perfectly in line with his character. Miss Crabtree's death, on the other hand, to me always came across as very sudden and callous. Don't get me wrong, I couldn't care less about Miss Crabtree as a character, but still, just suddenly cutting to her corpse and having Detective Murphy refer to her as an ancillary character that the fans wouldn't miss. I might not like Miss Crabtree as a character, and I might not really care that she's dead, but this death just comes across as tactless to me. Alright, and right here I'm just gonna close things off with what's, in my opinion, the most interesting unpopular opinion anyone listed to me. This person says that their least favorite era of South Park is seasons 5 through 7. And this kind of jumped out to me because I see a lot of people give flack to the older seasons for not being as, heavy with the satire and all that, and I see lots of people giving the new seasons slack for relying too much on satire, and also the elements of serialization, because it killed South Park, apparently. But it's commonly accepted that the middle seasons of South Park, sandwiched between South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut and the Book of Mormon, is the golden era of the show. But this person is saying that seasons 5 through 7 in particular have sort of a weird place in the show for them, where they feel as though it doesn't have the same charm as the early episodes, but it's not as well written as the new episodes. I don't know, maybe I'm just taking exception to this one because I feel as though it's a personal attack. This is pretty much my favorite era of the show. Season 6 is like my favorite, and seasons 5 and 7, like that whole era of the show to me is just great. Well, every era of the show to me is great, but you know what I mean. That particular period in the show always jumped out to me as being particularly high quality. I always thought this era of the show always hit the right balance of satire, like real-world satire, but also just taking advantage of the fact that they're a cartoon and they can literally do whatever they want. In this era, you see lots of examples where the emotional story is put more at the forefront, and then the satirical elements and all that are sort of put more in like a side plot. Like that episode, The Entity. It's really about the story of that weird, awkward cousin who's come into town that you're responsible for and is causing you embarrassment. And then they give Mr. Garrison a B-plot that's filled with observational jokes about trying to fly in a world where 9/11 just happened a month prior. And even the satire on that is pretty light and quick, and they quickly move past that into the business side of Mr. Garrison trying to sell it. I also think this is the best era for character study episodes, like Casa Bonita, which in my opinion is the second best Butters and Cartman episode the series has ever done. My favorite, of course, being the death of Eric Cartman, but even I have to admit that Casa Bonita does have something over the death of Eric Cartman. And that's that Casa Bonita, to me, is the quintessential Cartman episode. When Cartman finds out that Kyle's birthday is coming up and he's going to Casa Bonita, but he wants to bring Butters instead of him, he comes up with all these thinly veiled, misguided schemes to try and win back Kyle's invitation to his birthday party. Eventually, though, he realizes that isn't working and just goes for the, oh, I don't even care anymore card. So he effectively manipulates Kyle into promising Cartman that if Butters can't make it to Casa Bonita, he'll invite Cartman instead. So Cartman goes to Butters and pretends that a meteor's about to drop onto South Park, and he convinces Butters to hide away in Jimbo and Ned's bomb shelter. He completely tricks the entire town into thinking that Butters is missing just so he can go to a birthday party. To top it all off, when he finally gets caught, you know what he does? He just runs through Casa Bonita and hits up all the sites he wanted to see as quickly as possible, all while trying to dodge the police. In the commentary track for this episode, Matt Stone has stated that this scene is peak Cartman and really shows what Cartman's all about, and I couldn't agree more. He doesn't care about the consequences his actions have, he doesn't care really about what others think about him, all he cares about is that he gets to do what he wants. It doesn't matter if he's really enjoying himself or not, all he cares about is that he got to do everything he said he wanted to do. We also got Terrence and Phillip behind the blow, arguably the deepest look into Terrence and Phillip's backstory and lore ever. We got to see them be separated and at odds, and we also got to see them reconcile and become friends again. And let's not forget, we have this era to thank for Professor Chaos, and Towley, and Jimmy, and even though he was introduced in Season 2, this was also a big golden era almost for Tweek. You know, for all you Tweek fans out there. I can honestly say the worst part of this era of the show are Matt and Shrey's outdated views on global warming. But I mean, hey, that's just me, you know? Obviously this person disagrees with all those points, or at least, you know, most of them. But that's okay, because if I've learned anything from being a South Park fan, it's that there's no such thing as consensus in our fan base. There will always be the people who are like, oh, serialization bad. And there will always be people who are like, oh, the early seasons aren't funny because they're not vulgar. And as I've just learned, there are people who don't like the balance of the middle seasons. But, you know, it's time for me to close this video off. Sorry there weren't, like, a whole lot of unpopular opinions here. A lot of people were really giving me, like, pretty popular opinions that I see all over the place. And then a whole bunch of them were just, I like season blank. Which, unless your opinion is that you like season 20, it's not an unpopular opinion to like any of the seasons. But yes, these people here are fellow Season 20 apologists, but I'm really not going to get too into Season 20 because I'm going to have another video for that. But this has been a ton of fun, and you can go ahead and still leave more unpopular South Park opinions down below, and if I see any that are, like, worthwhile, I'll consider doing another one of these. And now for my unpopular opinion, this video is over. Hasta la pasta.